Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business of Business podcast. I'm your host, Roy. Of course, we are the podcast that brings you a very wide variety of guests that can speak to a lot of diverse topics. Today is no different. We're excited to have Lauren Winans. She is the Chief Executive Officer and Principal HR Consultant for Next Level Benefits, an HR consulting practice offering clients access to HR professionals for both short-term and long-term projects. With 20 years of human resources and employee benefits experience, she possesses a deep experience, a deep expertise of HR best practices and what resonates with employees. She founded Next Level Benefits in 2019, offering HR teams access to former corporate HR professionals on demand when they need them most. Lauren, thanks so much for taking time out of your day and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Roy. Really happy to be chatting with you today.
We're going to delve into this, HR. I think this is such an awesome time to be talking about, attracting, retaining employees and how we can do that, through a combination of a lot of different things, and benefits is one of those. But before we do, kind of tell us a little bit about your journey. Being in HR something you've thought about since you were a little kid? Or did you get into a job and just kind of fall into that? How did that come about?
I fell into it, I think much like most people, kind of fall into, whatever it is that they end up doing with their lives. I started out actually working at a health insurance company early in my career. So I learned everything you could want to know about medical insurance. And when I couldn't take it anymore, when I had learned it all, I decided to kind of move on to the employer side of things and work. I joined an organization as an entry-level benefits administrator. And really kind of, started my HR journey from there. And it's been, 20 years now of being within the HR function, like I said, primarily focused on employee benefits, but, a lot of other areas of HR kind of, fall within my wheelhouse, all the different disciplines of HR, including recruiting and talent management, compensation, HR leadership, organizational development, all of these different areas kind of converge and come together, to really kind of create the best employee experience. And that's really what I've been focused on over my entire career. And I'm really happy to have had the opportunity to fall into HR because it is a really, great industry to kind of work within. It's really, it's necessary across all industries.
Yeah. Yeah, and it kind of relates back to the health insurance days. I'm sure is that it's always changing. The minute you think you're on top of something, new rules, regulations, or even employer wants, demands, all of those things play into an ever-changing field. You mentioned, or I mentioned in your intro, that you do on demand. So for just not for we want to talk about some other things, but I just want to clarify that. So a growing company that may not can afford a full-time HR professional, they can reach out to y'all and get kind of fractional help. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Fractional interim services is really kind of our sweet spot. We have a lot of folks on staff that have at least 20 years of HR experience, just like myself, in many cases more. They can really step in and help in a variety of different capacities. And from an on-demand perspective, there's could be projects that come up that are unexpected where you just need some extra hands. It could be that, you have an open position or you have someone out on a maternity leave or a leave of absence and you really need a pinch hitter just for a handful of weeks or months.
Right.
All of those sorts of things are things that we can help with on an on-demand basis.
Yeah. I think that's one of the benefits about the gig economy, and of course about this electronic age, is that is so valuable to people because it's probably been going on for 5 or 10 years, but not that prevalent. But back in the day, it's like if you couldn't afford the full-time professional, you just had to do without or muddle through. So I think that such a valuable offering to growing businesses, or even people that are just, even if they want to stay small, that they can reach out, get that professional help, and not have to, be out the entire salary for somebody.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start the consulting firm is, I really have a passion for what I do, and I just wanted to be able to help more employers and more HR teams and more business owners, with my skill set. So it's a great way just to kind of, help out those who, might not necessarily have, our level of expertise. We can jump right in, get started, not have to spend a lot of time figuring out what next steps to take because we've been there, we've done that, and it's a great way to kind of leverage our experiences working with those who might not necessarily have this sort of expertise in house.
Yeah, and it's just like we talked about earlier, there's so many components to it that it's just much better to reach out, get a little professional help because what I find is, when we skimp on these types of things, we eventually end up paying more for either, and so when something
Always.
goes wrong.
Always, especially, there's a lot of compliance potholes when it comes to
Right.
HR. And so, yeah, you definitely want to make sure you're doing the right things in the right ways.
Yeah, and the other thing too, for somebody like yourself, it's probably easier to manage when it's not an emergency or not a crisis than trying to sort out that crisis situation. So,
For sure.
yeah,
For sure. Yeah, I've been in situations where, Department of Labor audits
oh,
and, HIPAA compliance audits and all
yeah,
sorts of things that you kind of fall into over the course of your career. And yes, it is much easier to do it right from the beginning than to do it wrong.
exactly, exactly. Well, let's jump into the benefit side of this because we're in I don't know if it's unprecedented. I hate to say that just yet, but we could be in a very unprecedented time with the work from home issue that some people are like, hey, I'm not going back. But also it's like what um, with people more hesitant to uh, pay more money, they try to make up for it in this benefits packages and different things like that. So let's what's your view of our world right this moment, coming out of the pandemic and trying to navigate that process?
Yeah, I think that, we have a variety of different, issues and concerns kind of coming together at the same time. And so, I think there's a lot of folks that might, want to blame the workforce shortage on, or the turnover tsunami, which I keep hearing as a great moniker for it. They want to blame it on the pandemic, or they want to blame it directly on increased unemployment benefit levels and amounts that are, getting issued to those who have open claims right now. And I totally agree that those are two, contributing factors. But I think there's also a few other things happening here. There's also, we have, baby boomers that may have accelerated their retirement for a variety of reasons. We have, folks that are coming out of college that aren't necessarily looking for entry level or hourly positions. They want, they want a better position coming out of school than maybe is available.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think there's folks who have been working from home for a while now, at least almost a couple of years at this point, who don't see a reason to have to go back into the office, and they're going to look for, an employer that is going to be flexible with them so they can continue the flexible lifestyle that they've been living for the past couple of years. So I think all of these different things are really coming to a head all at the same time, which is really, a shame, but also I think it's accelerating the future of work at the same time. So, part of me is excited to see where this, leads the workforce, generally speaking. But the other side of me, really feels for employers who are having a really hard time, staffing the positions, keeping either businesses open in some cases.
Right.
I think it's a critical issue right now. I think there's a lot of different ways to tackle it, but I think there's a lot of different factors at play as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, and you mentioned the people leaving the workforce. That's something I've heard a lot about lately, is just that there's so many people that have decided to retire, or they've made a conscious choice that because of vaccination rates not being where they need to be, if they're
Mhm.
vulnerable, especially, it's like, I'm just going to set this one out and stay home, or go do something, who knows what, some little side hustles or whatever enough to make ends meet, but not go back into the workforce. And I think, that's had a huge impact because you see it, and it's not just confined to, in the beginning, it was restaurants. Nobody wanted to come back, but every day on the news now, it's, truck drivers delivering fuel to fuel stations. It's, it's caused a lot of shortages in the grocery industry. And of course, they're coming back out and like, we don't want to hoard, but it all gets back to supply chain issues.
Yep, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of open positions right now in some really critical industries. And it's over time, it's going to continue to impact us in a negative way. And it's going to be very interesting to see how employers respond in that way.
Right.
I think right now there is, naturally a desire to want to fill open roles with whomever is able to provide that level of talent or expertise, or just simply a warm body in some cases. But to your point, I think there's some folks who exited the workforce permanently, whether it be retirement or whether it be, medically, based on my health, I'm not sure I can handle this environment. And we have a lot of, women who have had to exit the workforce to care for their children because of, the childcare shortages and, increased costs. So there's so many, issues and problems right now. It really is kind of, scary in a way. But ideally, I think that there is a way to really kind of meet in the middle and find ways to get creative about how to fill these roles. Perhaps it's not, a 1-for-1 head count backfill. Maybe it's like you were saying before, the gig economy is alive and well, and maybe there's opportunities for freelancers, for contractors, for folks who want to work part-time and are not interested in full-time work. I think there is opportunities to get creative on how we can adjust workforce strategies and really kind of solve for some of the societal issues we're experiencing.
Yeah, I think that that's the bigger overarching concept, I think, is being creative. And, we'll talk. One thing I jotted down was, the remote work. And I think, and then you mentioned women, is that, while I've worked from home for probably 20 years or more, I really get it. And I get it more. I actually get it more for the women because of childcare. And, something else that we talk a little bit about too, is that the poor daughter-in-law is usually the one that takes care of all the elderly people in the family too. I mean, it's like, it would just get through with the kids, and now it's, taking care of the parents, and it never ends. But unfortunately, it's seen as, well, you're not dedicated to your job because you want to go out and take care of this. And I had a conversation not long ago with she runs a remote consulting company for technology. And she is totally remote and made that as a conscious choice because it's a couple things. Number one, we spread that talent. We spread our gathering of talent over, maybe the US or a wider area. So we're not confined to who's available in our area, but then also all these benefits of, being able to be closer and run. If you have to go pick somebody up from school, or you have a sick child, they can be laying in the other room if they don't need a lot of attention. And, if you're writing a report, maybe we have a deadline, of it has to be through by Friday, but really does it matter if you're keystroking at 9 a.m. or at 9 p.m, as long as you get a good report turned out. So, I am certainly an advocate of, like I said, and, unless you have to have a piece of equipment, that remote work is just, it's such a benefit. And for the employee, and sometimes for the employer, people tend to work more, or they feel this, like myself, I feel this obligation, like, what a blessing that, I always want to make sure I'm giving just that little bit more. Is that going to be a huge enticement going through this tsunami if it materializes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that those who are used to remote work at this point, regardless of how many years they've been doing it, I think have realized that there's more benefits than there are drawbacks.
Right.
I think that there are some drawbacks. Don't get me wrong. There are definitely some social drawbacks and, feeling like you live at work instead of working from home, right? So, there's definitely some drawbacks, but I think that, the flexibility kind of outweighs that in a lot of different cases. And most positions that can be handled from a remote environment, I think that employers are seeing firsthand through the pandemic, and even now, hey, we were just as productive. In fact, maybe even more productive.
Exactly.
And perhaps we should really consider this. And you kind of hit the nail on the head too, from a turnover tsunami perspective. The best way to be competitive and expand your talent pool is being open to a remote and even a hybrid workforce environment, because that means that you can get, folks, if you're based in, New York, you can actually get some folks in California that maybe you couldn't have gotten before because you were based on, getting people who were local and wanting them to come into the office. So your ability to obtain really talented individuals, you expand that pool pretty quickly when you've acknowledge that remote work is just as productive, that you can, do the same work as you did before. But I, other side of the coin, there are some jobs that do require you to go into an office or a manufacturing facility, or a plant of some sort. And, those jobs are the ones that are the hardest to fill right now. And I think there needs to be, from an employer perspective, an acknowledgement that it's time to overhaul the rewards that we are offering employees who do need to come on site for some reason.
Yeah.
So we need to be looking at compensation. We need to be looking at benefits. We need to be looking at development opportunities and training opportunities and cross training, which I think is something that's kind of fallen by the wayside in a lot of cases. All of these sorts of things, I think, employers need to get a little more dynamic and creative these days.
Right. Now, and you mentioned earlier about maybe instead of hiring one full-time worker, maybe we hire two part-times. I think that, the remote plays into that too, is that I may not even want to get up and struggle to drive an hour to work 3 or 4 hours and then drive an hour home. Whereas, if we have that pooling, it's like if you got two people, one works in the morning, one works in the afternoon, if the job is suited, then, that the remote aspect even helps that even more. I feel like.
For sure. And, dispersing talent amongst time zones is actually really helpful too, for a variety of, different, industries and services. Like customer service, for example, is one of those ones that, a lot of the larger corporations have kind of moved to a remote environment and have been even prior to the pandemic. And it allows them to service their customers for longer periods of time during the day because of it. So there's definitely advantages. And I think if we can kind of, we as employers can kind of step out of, the paternalistic view of needing to physically see each other in the office every day, if we can step out of that and just accept that times have changed, I really do think that, employers can get creative around what offerings they can change and enhance to really increase that employee value proposition and make people want to work for them.
Right. Yeah. And that, years ago when I did work in an office, I feel like this helps me control my day much better because, working in an office, I jokingly say that, I started out with the open door, and then it was, I had to close the door, and then I had to like wedge a chair up underneath the door to keep people from just coming in. And then it's like, it's just, some of it's socializing, some of it's just office talk, but it's like you do all that from 9 to 5, and then, about go eat dinner, and then about 6, you can really sit down and get your day started and do your work from, 6 to midnight. So, from those perspective, that's one reason why I love it. I just feel like so much more productive when I'm at home. And, but also you talked about the college kids coming out, and I guess they're not, what I hear, I'll let you expound on this, is that they're not looking for the traditional opportunities. Like, I'm of a certain age that we came out of a school and we looked for a company and a discipline that we liked. And or maybe not like, but we went there and you stayed for 30 years. And it's just not, that mindset is long gone.
Yeah, it's long gone, and there's some unfortunate aspects of that, and then there's also some, it's changing the way that we work, and it's changing how organizations craft their people strategy.
Right.
And so there is some benefits to that mindset shift. But yes, there are folks that are coming out of college, folks that are, I guess you would call them, what is that, Gen Z, maybe Gen Z and millennials, that are not necessarily as loyal to an organization, but are really looking for organizations that can benefit them in their lifestyles.
Yeah.
And so employers that are able to kind of make changes in a lot of ways to their people strategy, where they can really kind of customize and create some sort of personalized benefits, compensation, really try to attract that mindset to their organization.
Yeah.
I think that they are able to get those folks that are younger, right out of college. I think those that employers that are not necessarily as skilled at identifying what that age bracket is looking for, are having trouble getting some of those folks into their organizations. And ultimately, would you love to have your employees stay, 20, 30 years? Yeah, of course. But I think there's some pros and cons to that too, right? You getting fresh set of eyes on things and a new way of doing things. And, one of the, I grew up in the retail industry. So a lot of my HR experiences was at, retail organizations, and there's high turnover in a retail environment, not just in the stores, but also in a corporate and distribution center manufacturing facilities. And so, the one benefit of that is that, you get to see what other competitors are doing from a process and creative perspective, because those coworkers that you have now came from those places.
Right.
So there's a lot of opportunity to kind of learn and grow, not only at an employee level, but also as an organization to learn and grow, because you're basically stealing your competitors' employees and learning a lot from that experience. So I think it's really just an acceptance situation at this point. We just have to accept that those that are coming out of school are not going to be sitting in the seats for probably any more than 3 to 5 years at most.
Yeah.
And that's just a fact. We just need to kind of accept it and move on and develop strategy around that. And just be prepared for when folks leave the organization, and how are we going to manage through that?
Yeah. So what are, we don't have to get into it in depth, but what are some of the benefits that you may look at offering that college graduate? One thing I hear a lot about is causes, like sometimes the companies do, like, well, you get 2, 3, 5 hours a month to go work on a cause that's really meaningful to you. But what are some other things that companies could offer to get a new college graduate interested in working for them?
Yeah, I mean, social responsibility is a big one. Any way that an organization can kind of tie its overall organizational mission and values to social causes is really important. To younger workers, they're looking to work for an organization that aligns with their own personal values and where they want to volunteer and dedicate their time. So they're much more selective in that way. And so I am seeing organizations not only, infusing volunteer opportunities within the organization, but also championing any sort of volunteer work that an employee wants to do outside of the organization, by providing them with some paid volunteer days to go and do those activities within their community. Yeah. And I think that, younger workers are also looking for, the remote flexibility that we've been talking about. They also want some help with saving for retirement. So any sort of benefit that can help them, whether it be a 401k match or financial planning services and guidance, tax preparation, all those sorts of things are, hot topics. And also student loan reimbursement is really, a hot benefit right now, very trendy in at a lot of different organizations. The student loans that kids are coming out of school with these days is
Wow.
astronomical, and they really need some help to try to pay those down.
Yeah.
And that's where you can kind of, create some sort of, a loyalty program, if you, so to speak, if you are willing to reimburse for some, student loans, then you can ask for loyalty in tenure and service in exchange. And that is sort of the best way to kind of keep folks in place is hey, I help you, you help me, sort of thing. And I think those are all areas, in addition to the obvious, right? Health insurance, comprehensive, health insurance is always, key and critical. And any sort of, paid time off and flexibility is also critical.
Yeah. Yeah. And how prevalent is that with the flex time? I know it's working from home is one thing, but also flex time, like, as long if I come in at 9 to 6 or 10 to 8 or, 5 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Again, we get back to it's the job for sure, but for the
Mm.
most part, if we overlap where we can be in meetings and, now with Zoom and Teams and things like that, um, I don't know. I kind of wonder if those old days of having to get around a conference table may be gone because I don't necessarily need to slide you anything across the table for you to look at. I can put it up on my screen. I can email it to you. It's anyway, but kind of talking um, about that flex time. How important is that? And how
I think
easy
it's
is that for the employer to offer would be the next question.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think especially as remote work continues and folks that might be working for a company headquartered in one time zone and they're in another, I think it's really important to have a level of flexibility, not just due to time zone differences, but also just due to lifestyle differences, right? There are early birds that like to get up and get cracking, and then there are also folks that do better, working in the evening. And it's a matter of preference. It's a matter of lifestyle. If you have young children, also if you're taking care of elderly parents. I mean, there's lots of different factors I think that could arise. And so I think the more flexible an employer can be, the better. And I think a lot of employers, what they do is they institute core hours. And the ideal situation is that 90% of your population is online and available during core hours.
Yeah.
And so depending upon your industry and where you're located, those core hours are typically between 9 and 3, at least some window within that time frame. It might not necessarily be a full 6 hours, but it's usually somewhere between 9 and 3, 10 and 2,
Yeah.
where the majority of the employees are working and available in case collaboration is necessary, or a team Zoom call is required, or if someone might need to drive into the office because perhaps they're local to a headquarter or a hub office.
Yeah.
Those are typically the hours that make the most sense. But outside of those hours, really providing a level of flexibility is the most important thing right now, for a variety of reasons.
And it's like myself, I live in Fort Worth, Texas, and, there's a lot of industry and a lot of jobs in Dallas. So, if I just got my car and just took off over there, I don't know, maybe, 45 minutes. But the problem is, and one reason why I've never accepted a job from over there is because on any given morning, you could have 2, 3, 4 wrecks in between, and this 45-minute drive can take you 2 hours and 45 minutes. Not that I
Yeah.
didn't, it's like, because it's the old adage of, well, you need to plan and you need to get up. So do I need to leave at 5 o'clock every morning and get there, way before time? Or, it's tough, but I think with being flexible, where we know that if people are, if I was to get in at 9 or 9:30, if I do my time, that's really all that matters. And like you said, if I'm overlapping, if we've got core hours where we need to collaborate, but The awesome thing about technology is, we can talk on the phone, not holding it up. Of course, we need to be responsible drivers and have it on the speaker. But, if you're sitting in traffic anyway, you're not really driving too fast, so I don't know. There's so much we live in such a great time, both for the employer and the employee, that I just feel like there's certain ways that we can work around the hard and fast rules. Like I said, unless you're working on an assembly line where you just have to be there to, when something comes rolling by to, put a tire on it or whatever. There are ways that we can find to kind of meet in the middle, get the job done, but yet be empathetic of the employee situation as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that employers who are willing to make adjustments and accommodations and kind of really assess, how their workforce can continue to be productive with, flexible opportunities, I think are going to be the ones that sustain themselves, continue to attract talented individuals. And, I think that those organizations that are maybe not necessarily as open to change or open to flexibility, aside from those that, have to have it because of the type of product that they make or the type of business that they're in, those that are resistant to change just because they're resistant to change, I think are the ones that are going to struggle. Yeah. And, I think we all know that, it all comes down to the talent that you have within the organization, right? You want talented folks with the skill sets you need to become successful, to continue, to drive revenue, to, drive shareholder value in some cases. And, I think that, competing for talent is incredibly important right now.
Yeah. And, one of my slogans is, I think that we, in HR, I think that we need to look at it like sales and marketing, is that we always need to be marketing for good talent, and we shouldn't, there's, we could have 2 or 3 episodes on that about, being proactive in recruiting and not getting our, and we can't always help it, but a lot of times we could be more proactive where we're not just taking a pulse and saying, I think you got a pulse, you're going to be good. Being able to really select those employees, because what they end up doing is it just gets in a vicious cycle. We create the turnover. Maybe they're not trained up. They interact poorly with our customers or with other employees. Things don't get done. So it can lead to a whole lot. I would love to see all industries just be more proactive in that and get out and, like I said, market for the talent. Don't just wait for, hey, we had a job open, so we need to fling out some kind of a, electronic ad to see if we can get somebody to respond, because you can talk to this too, because that sets off another cycle. Is we get 2,000 applicants and about 50 of them are actually qualified people that we want to look at, but we got to pay somebody to sift through the other 1,950 applications to try to weed those out.
Well, I think that, this is kind of where organizational development is so critical. And I think some employers don't get it right, unfortunately. So if you are within an organization that really does organizational development well, personal development training, employees are able to kind of access and really figure out what they're good at.
Yeah.
And once they can figure out what they're good at, they tend to gravitate towards, opportunities that allow them to be successful.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of folks that end up applying to random jobs just to apply in hopes that they'll get a call back might not necessarily have had the opportunity to work for an organization that saw their value and helped them figure out what they were good at.
Yeah.
And so I think you've got some folks that are just applying to apply, and, those that are genuinely qualified, they may or may not even like doing that job.
Yeah.
And so I think an organization that has a really robust development program that includes both personal, professional development, training, and has really great leadership that can kind of spot, okay, you know what? so and so is, working as an executive assistant, but they're actually really fantastic at communications. We probably should give them an opportunity to maybe sit over here for 6 weeks
Yeah.
and figure out if maybe that is more fulfilling for them and more valuable for us, because that's where their skill set is.
Yeah.
And so I think when you've got an organization that has the opportunity to do that sort of development, whether they're small or large, really, any employer size can be effective at doing this.
Yeah.
I think that helps to not only create employees that want to stay with you because they see the value in working for you,
Yeah.
but it also helps to cultivate the workforce in general. So
Yeah.
if and when that person leaves you and goes somewhere else, they're probably going to apply for the right job this time, and they're going to find the right job for their skill set and not necessarily waste the next recruiter's time. So there's some benefit to organizational development that kind of gets overlooked.
Yeah.
And I think that there's great opportunity, to really kind of decrease that kind of like, I'm just going to click and send my resume here in hopes that I'll get a call. I think there's opportunities there for organizations to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, and I just written down development as we right before you started. And I think it's good to think about it, not only what you talked about earlier, the cross-functional, but I feel like too, we even if it's a short period, if we go to different departments, we kind of get a little more empathy for what they're going through instead of more like hey, they just keep dumping all this stuff, or
Right.
they're asking for all this crazy stuff. But if we like seek to understand what their job is and why they do it, and we talk a lot about the communication between sales and marketing. I think those are great opportunities because marketing is never doing enough for salespeople, and salespeople are never closing enough for marketing's leads that they send over there. But
Yeah.
we can seek to figure out, are we getting the right leads, and just opening up that communication. But I can't, my opinion, I think that the cross, even if it's maybe not as a permanent move, but if it's like you said, 6 weeks, a temporary, maybe, riding with somebody, or, sitting next to them for a day, a week, and getting that. But then the other part I think is we've overlooked is the development for future leadership. And, we have to really keep an eye on that. The education component, we can't be scared to spend the money. I love the old saying I use all the time is CFO goes to CEO and says, how can we keep training all these people and they keep leaving? And he's like, the CEO says, well, how can we not train them and have them stay? So
Right.
we can't be
Right.
scared of these people leaving. And the other thing too, we never know when they come back. Sometimes they may leave for a short period of time, go somewhere else, get some more experience, because as we start working up any company, it's more of a pyramid. You start getting to the top, slots are open, fewer and far between. And so the only thing, and that I was going to say that too, back on the, not being at the same company for 30 years, the way it benefits employees too, is they get a raise. Sometimes we stay at the same company, you get your 2-3%. If you really want to bump, you may have to go somewhere. But again, as you said, in the retail, we train them, they go somewhere else, and they come back with a world of experience and how other people are doing it, maybe refresh some things we're doing. So I just never feel like training or development is a bad thing. It's always money well spent.
It is. And I think that some organizations don't know how to do it well. And those that do, they reap the dividends of it. They have, really diverse employees within their organization who, like you said, really do understand the cross-functional requirements to collaborate, and they understand process flows and how the organization kind of goes through this, from this position down to this position, how all these different things work. I think that companies that can really kind of focus on that as a priority, it's going to benefit them in the long run for sure. And I think there's also, and from a leadership perspective, there is a huge opportunity right now to kind of capitalize on some of the feelings and thoughts that we've had through the early days of the pandemic, and really kind of step back, as leaders, and really think, when I lead with empathy, I get more productivity.
Yeah.
Novel idea.
Right. Right.
And I think that really kind of looking back and reflecting on what a crazy time that we've lived through, and we kind of we still are living through, and we will continue to live through. But those first handful of months when we all didn't know what was going to happen and what was going to come next, I think if leaders really stepped back and thought about those moments, how their team felt, how they felt, and the type of support that they gave their teams, and if they really thought through what worked and what didn't work, they should really continue those behaviors that worked. And I think that leading with empathy is one of those things that was incredibly important during those first few phases of the pandemic. And when you continue to lead in a way that makes you feel good as a person and makes your team feel good, you're on the right track. No matter what, you're on the right track. And people are watching you, right? So like the leaders of tomorrow are watching you, lead by example, and they will mimic you. So if you take the opportunity to recognize what works, what doesn't work, and really start to kind of spread and impart your knowledge, that's the best way to kind of develop your future leaders, is just be a great example for them.
Exactly. So let's talk about for just a minute coming back together for those companies where we've had remote workers and now we're bringing everybody back. And I don't know, I guess I kind of have mixed emotions on this because when this pandemic started, we thought probably after a few months there would be an increase in violence just in the community at large because of things, but it didn't really manifest until recently. And then, here in our area, it seemed like crime and violent crime, everything has been on the rise. And then we've had the turbulent times of, seemed like that sometimes people's ideologies are at polar opposites and there's no middle. We can't, if you don't like my way of thinking, then I'm going to call you, I'm going to attack you personally, regardless of if it's, the left or the right. That's not important. But what do you think about when people start coming back? They've been on their own. We've got all this other stuff going on. Are there going to be some integration problems that we need to really be aware of and kind of maybe take some precautionary steps?
I think that I like to approach it from an optimistic standpoint. I really think that there's a lot of good in people, and that when there's divisiveness, there's also an ability to kind of look at things with a critical lens and maybe a different perspective. So I like to think that as employees come back into the workplace, that they're going to have the ability to come in with the perspective and the lens that, I'm here at work. This is a professional environment. I might have different views and different perspectives, but I did before the pandemic, and I'm still going to have them after the pandemic. And, I did before, certain, racial inequities came, more to light than they ever have before, and I will after. And, I think it's important for employers to facilitate the proper environment, and address any sort of issues or concerns with promptness and with thoroughness. But I think it's also up to employees to remember that we're all human. We all have difference of opinion, and it's important to be respectful of one another, regardless of where we're coming from. And like I said, I feel strongly that people do have good intentions. They just sometimes get misplaced.
Yeah.
And that's what human resource representatives are really for, right? To really kind of step in and help when perhaps teams aren't seeing eye to eye, or leaders aren't seeing eye to eye with their subordinate employees. And that's when you can leverage HR. Those are the exact moments that you need human resources within your organization to kind of step up and really help the organization through challenging times or any sort of divisive moments.
Yeah, and I don't want to belabor the point of because I'm sure we both agree on that. Uh, the need for policies, procedures, handbooks, for everything to be written down, documented, for us to have documented evidence that the employees have at least seen it. They can't make them read it, but
Right.
just to have that base fundamental is so important. And the other part of that is we don't, if we're a smaller company, if we got one, two, it's the time to start putting it in place. There's no, you
Right.
don't want to wait till you got 100 people. You're going to be way behind the eight ball. So I think that's another, uh,
Yeah.
it's a valuable service of HR, but then it's also of the on demand that, hey, I don't have the knowledge. If I'm a plumber or something and I don't really have that HR knowledge, that's where, the reach out on demand that could get some of those products from somebody like yourself to really help protect. That's a risk management strategy, as well as, we want to do the right thing.
Yeah, no, I think policies, procedures, process, documents, they're all critically important for an organization, generally speaking, but also for leaders and HR professionals when they need to make decisions about someone's, status within the organization, whether they, need to leave the organization because of a violation of company policy. But, ultimately, there are certain things that should not be brought to the workplace, and there are certain things within the workplace that are not allowed. Sexual harassment, workplace bullying, discrimination. All of these sorts of things are prohibited by law. And if you are an employer who does not have a solid handbook and solid policies, that can be concerning, not only from a compliance perspective, but to your employees. Your employees want to work for an organization that is going to make sure that the environments that they work in are safe.
Yeah.
And they want to feel supported, regardless of who they are, what gender they are, what ethnicity they are. They want to feel as if they can be welcome and included in your environment. And the best way to do that, policies and procedures, and effectively enforcing those policies and procedures and taking action when those policies and procedures are broken.
Yeah. And I'm going to kind of give you not a scenario, but talk about something. And I want to get your input to, because a lot of times if as an employee, if I reach out to you in HR, it can start, I don't know, it can set off a chain of events. And so I guess in my opinion is, if you feel uncomfortable or something that you're not sure, I would rather you go immediately to HR, either be reassured that everything is okay, or be reassured everything is not okay, and here's what we can do. But I think it's important that we encourage, we don't want it to be uh trivial, like some Susie was using my pencil and stapler while I was gone, things like that.
Yeah.
But for the important issues, we need to encourage employees to reach out to HR. Let's get this solved. Let's don't let it fester, because I
Mm.
also feel like if I'm sitting here feeling wronged, it just builds. And then the next thing you do, I'm like, yeah, that's just piling on. And then it just gets to
Yeah.
a level that maybe it didn't really have to get to. So,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think there's opportunities there. Well, first off, if you are helping your leaders to effectively lead, a lot of times the best first stop when you have a issue or concern as an employee is to go directly to your direct supervisor. Now, if your direct supervisor is part of the problem, then of course that's not a very good
Right.
option. But if they are not, that is the first stop. If you can't get what you need out of that conversation, or if perhaps they direct you directly to human resources, that is, ultimately a good HR department is able to confidentially listen to your concerns, provide you with guidance and advice, and ask you if it's okay to move forward to help facilitate solving the problem.
Yeah.
There are certain things that are brought to HR's attention that they are required to report. So, for example, like we were talking before, I mean, instances of sexual harassment.
Yeah.
There is a protocol that comes with that because of the level of severity of something of that nature.
Right.
But if it's, you've got some concerns about something that, you want to confidentially speak with someone, an HR, a full service, proper HR department is the best way to manage that. What some employers do, you mainly see it from a large employer perspective, but they will actually have hotlines. They're confidential hotlines where you can dial in and report any sort of concern that you have anonymously. And you can decide if you want to be, not anonymous. If you want to share your contact information, you can do so.
Yeah.
And whomever is responsible for manning that hotline has a responsibility and a duty to protect your privacy at all costs.
Yeah.
And there are policies around privacy within an organization as well that kind of, help, to kind of put employees at ease.
Yeah.
So even small businesses can kind of implement a very similar process.
Right.
I know I have a client of mine who actually has in their handbook that any sort of issue or concern that needs to be handled with a confidential and private nature, there's two individuals in the organization that they can go to who have been identified and selected to keep utmost confidence and privacy through whatever issue or concern may be voiced to them.
Yeah.
And so even a small business can kind of implement a system, a safety net for employees to feel safe to bring forward issues and concerns without any sort of repercussions.
Yeah, and I think that's important to make the employee feel like there is a path to address it, because sometimes you feel like if there's no path, that means that nobody really cares. So it's just a great piece of proactive work. And the other thing I was just going to add to that was documentation, as the employee, as the employer, the manager, just jot a quick note down. We've got so many tools. I use OneNotes, but I've got a paper book here that I keep, jot down notes as we're talking, that it's so easy just to jot down the date, who it is, what we spoke about, because if something does come up 6 months, 8 months from now, like I don't remember that. But then also as the employee, you've got documented evidence of, what I've tried with this person, I've tried, before. So anyway, just hate to don't want to dwell on the negative, but though that's an important function of HR, I feel like, is that we just have to, have a path to work these things out.
Oh, for sure. And I think that documentation on both sides, employer documentation and employee documentation, is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there are going to be times where you as an employee are going to voice a concern and it's not going to be handled the way that you would like it to be handled. Okay. And, you have to decide, this is not the HR, side of me talking. This is the human side of me talking. You have to decide what you're willing to put up with. Right. And I think that is kind of, takes our conversation full circle in that is also a contributing factor to the high turnover and the workforce, issues that we're experiencing right now within the US is people are fed up with certain right. kinds of things, and they're not willing to put up with it any longer. And they're looking, to go to a different employer or to leave the workforce altogether. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, as a human being, deciding, this action or inaction is, not suitable for me. I am not going to play party to this anymore, or I don't want to be treated this way, or I don't want to work for an organization that condones this or doesn't take care of this. It's okay to move on. You know, it's okay to make those decisions. And, you know, it's also, it's okay from an employer perspective sometimes to have to handle it the way that you have to handle it,
Yeah.
even though you would rather keep that employee and you know it's not going to make them very happy. Sometimes you have to make the good business decision.
Yeah.
And sometimes you know, you can please everybody, but it's rare.
Yeah.
It's rare, and it's just, it's okay if you need to move on.
Yeah.
It's okay. Some people need to hear that sometimes. That's why I try to include that in a lot of my conversation about HR work, is because, you know, HR gets a bad rap sometimes, you know, like sometimes, you know, HR is seen as, you know, a function that doesn't necessarily work for the people, you know, and there are circumstances, it's a tightrope. You know, you gotta balance the business, supporting the business and supporting the employees. And, you know, sometimes decisions are made that does not make the employees happy.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's okay. It's gonna happen. Prepare yourself.
I had an instance where, you know, I walked out of my office one day and this HR guy, I loved him to death. He was awesome, but you know, he was just walking down the hall talking to my boss. I'm like, not what you want to see on Monday morning is your boss and the HR guy walking down the hall towards your office.
No, it's not. It's not. But you know, that's the other thing too. Those sorts of things happen all the time to really great, talented people. And so if you ever end up in that situation, know that they don't want to do it and they have to do it, and you don't want to hear it, and you might not have any choice but to hear it. So it's
Luckily, these guys, luckily they walked on by and went somewhere else, so I was good.
Good. So you were safe. You were safe. But like I said, it happens to the best of us, you know, and it's like I said, it's business. And, you know, sometimes you just have to be like, all right, time to move on to the next thing.
Right. All right, Lauren. Well, thanks so much. We're running way late. I appreciate your time. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to maybe get a commitment out of you to come back, because there's so much I want to talk about. I wanted to talk about the onboarding portion. I feel like that's gotten to be overlooked. Well, it's non-existent in a lot of places. It's like, you know, here's your desk and there's your computer. Good luck to you. So anyway, I'd like for you to come back. There's just so much more in this space to talk about, but appreciate your time today. Couple questions before we go. Number one, what is a tool or a habit, something that you use in your daily life that you feel like adds a lot of value?
Okay, well, really, there's so many, but I think the one that is probably top of mind as of late, and something that I've been actively practicing, is creating boundaries, and really trying to craft my schedule, my work schedule, actually my whole life schedule, in a way that works for me. And so, you know, I don't want to start taking calls before a certain time, or if I want to carve out time to really focus on putting a project together without any distractions, I am not apologetic any longer about setting boundaries. And I would encourage that habit amongst all of your listeners, and, you know, anyone, quite frankly, because it really does help you to feel a little more in control of our days that really they do get away from us quite a bit.
No, that's a good point. It's so hard. It's so hard to get in a habit, but it can be so liberating for us to just not feel like, well, like I said, like I was talking about earlier, not to feel like during the day we've got all this, you know, it's more the tail wagging the dog, and then, you know, at 6 o'clock when everybody else is gone, and we can sit down and get our work done. So
carve out that time for yourself. Carve out, if you know you need 3 hours to work on something, carve it out and block it off. And I've been doing that more lately, and it has been very helpful for my mental health.
Well, that's awesome advice. Thanks for that. So let's tell everybody, who do you like to work with? How can you help them? And then, of course, how can they reach out and get a hold of you?
Sure. Yeah. You know, we work with clients of all sizes. You know, we have Fortune 500 clients. We have my smallest client has 10 employees. So we really are kind of open to all sizes, all industries. We love to work with existing HR teams as extra hands to help them through complex projects. And we also love to support small businesses, or even, middle-sized businesses who might not necessarily have an extensive team to handle, HR issues. We can kind of step in and be your advisor. We can also step in and execute. So there's a variety of different things that we can do. I mean, from an HR consulting perspective, we really focus on all disciplines of HR. As I mentioned earlier, our team all has 20 years, at least 20 years of HR experience at corporations across the country. So we've really seen it all, quite frankly. And so we can really step in and help in any capacity, whether that is on a project basis, whether it's on a retainer basis because you want to have someone to reach out to because you don't have anyone in-house to really handle HR issues, or whether you just simply need some help, assessing your current strategy and developing something that's going to work for you. We can do all of that. Where you can reach us, you can check out our website. It is nlbenefits.com. That's probably the best way to get more information about our services, get more information about our staff, as well as you can get some quotes for some clients and some of our recent projects that we've done. It's a great way to kind of get more information about how we can help you. And you can reach out, schedule a call, or send me an email through that website as well.
Okay, great. Well, y'all reach out, let Lauren help you with your HR needs, or at least let her confirm that you're moving in the right direction. It never hurts to have a second set of eyes on these processes. There's always something new that's coming up. But again, I appreciate your time very much. It's been awesome information that you've given us. So that's going to do it for another episode of the Business of Business podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Roy. You can find us at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com. We are on all the major podcast platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, Google, Spotify. If we're not on one that you listen to, please reach out. I'd be glad to add it, make it easier for you to listen to us. You can also reach out on social media. We're on all the major platforms. Probably hang out more on Instagram than anywhere else, but be glad to get a message through there. Also, a video of this interview will go up on YouTube when the episode goes live. So until next time, take care of yourself and take care of your business.